Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host Mitchell J. Rabin, and we're very glad that you're joining us again today. Today we're going to have another very interesting show. We're very pleased to have with us again Joseph Mark Cohen, who teaches Kabbalah across the world, actually, while leading people on exotic adventures to all corners of the world, to sacred sites in Egypt and elsewhere. Israel, of course, and is teacher of Kabbalah and Kabbalistic astrology, and has done a number of improvisations on the subject of Kabbalah based on many years of research. He is now going to be starting a school called the Tree of Life School of Kabbalistic Healing in Boulder, and he's been kind enough to come onto the show and talk to us about what he has up his sleeve.
Welcome, Joseph Mark. You make me feel like a cross between a Kabbalist and Houdini.
Maybe the Kabbalah really is as mystical and mysterious as everyone says.
Right.
Yeah. So what is it that inspired you at this point in time to begin the school?
Well, I had students who requested it, first of all, and I, of my own preference, have preferred to take people to caves and sacred sites and marketplaces and, learn Kabbalah Mediterranean style, with ouzo and mint tea.
In the world,
on the side. But in and I've also, taken people for large chunks of time where they couldn't make a livelihood to do it. So all of a sudden it seemed more practical to have a school where people could meet, once a season for 3-4 days and have a larger community so that there could be some support and some growth in between. So I'm going to support the ongoing classes with some email and some linked meditation and that sort of thing.
Excellent. Hyperlinks between all students.
Exactly.
That's wonderful.
Exactly.
Good. What are going to be the main subjects? You've got the school broken down into 6 primary components.
Well,
and why don't you just tell us what they are?
Okay.
And then the links, as it were, between them.
Okay. Well, the first component that people seem to enjoy most from the work that I do is the sound work. So it's an exploration of sound healing from a Kabbalistic perspective. So actually,
could you give us an example of
sure, for the first time,
what that sounds like?
Well, sure. I was just doing a little class tonight in New York, and basically the class was on shamanic Kabbalah, looking at different biblical characters as carrying an energy that parallels shamanism. So, if you look at the story of Elijah or Moses or the prophet Samuel or Miriam or Rachel, you see different themes that if you were reading Shaman's Drum or cross-cultural shamanic literature, you would see, this looks kind of like shamanism.
Some parallel, sure.
Yes, definitely parallel. So, in the way that one of my favorite Kabbalists worked with sound, Rabbi Abraham Abulafia, he was friends with many Sufis, and he developed a kind of a sonic meditation that in these days it would be called vocal harmonics, where there's many tones held within a tone. Mm-hmm. So we were just doing the chant
as in the overtone series?
As in overtone series, yes, absolutely. So we were just, and when you look at the Hebrew words and phrases, you can find hidden chants, if you will, series of 4 or 5 vowels within a phrase. And I've done this before, I think, on this show.
Yes.
But a very simple one is the name.
But it was many ages ago.
Right. Eliyahu's name has 4 vowels in it. It's E, I, A, U. So without putting in the L of Eliyahu or the Y, you can see there's a strand of vowels. And these vowels affect what you could call the light stream or the energy centers or aspects of one's personal tree of life. So I guess for the viewers, if you might want to close your eyes and tune in, and I'll just chant it once, okay, or
Please.
Twice. energetically from those sounds?
Well, at the last piece of it, it seemed to be primarily affecting my solar plexus. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if that's good. Ultimately, what you have.
That's good.
It's very good, because ultimately, what you have is like a cloak. There's a whole biblical story about the cloak of Eliyahu and how it's passed on to the prophet Elisha at a moment of initiation, really, when Eliyahu, just before Eliyahu goes up in the vortex of the how shall we call it, the Sufa or the Sa'ara, it's the whirlwind. So in a certain sense, if you look at the story carefully, Eliyahu makes his ascension in a spiral vortex field, which is quite interesting. But just before that happens, he passes over his cloak, or his mantle is what it's called, translated as, to his apprentice, student, beloved Elisha. And I believe that these vowels formulate the cloak, so that the A sound comes from the transpersonal point, or the point of Ein Sof, above the crown. The E is the balancing between the Chokhmah Bina energies in the tree of life. The A opens the heart, and then the U goes to the belly or the navel center. So this is a descent of vowels coming through. And I know there was one person who wrote a book recently, I think, called Stalking Elijah, a buddy of mine, Roger Kamenetz, and he wrote a little chapter, I think, on his experience of these tones. I think it was at the 1991 Aleph Kala. So it's there's a few people that have experienced it and gone on little journeys, but that's just one of a number.
I had a Tai Chi teacher, Bob, who used to use the Hebrew sounds and teach us about the awakening of the chakras through the sounds.
To the sound, yeah. It is the quickest way to go into meditation, and it is the most, for healing work, the sonic healing, working with the vowel tones, I believe, is the clearest way to work. So, but that's not the only thing. You know, in the school you know, there might be a few Hasidic nigunim and other ways of working with sound. Because when one really gets into sound, one works with pitch, one works with tone, you can work with repetition. Rhythm. I like to put people into what I call a sonic temple, so that I'll create a group of 6 people chanting different chants and someone in the center spinning. So it gets very experimental, and there's some very deep experiences that can happen when everyone creates intention and attunement in that laboratory of sound.
Sure. And you've done this in the pyramids as well.
Well, I learned some of it, from early childhood Hebraic chanting, and hung out with Sufis and learned a little bit about their sound practices. And in Egypt, on a couple of occasions, learned a lot at particular temple sites where the acoustics of the architecture was set up for tremendous feedback.
Yes, indeed.
And these days, I myself go and do my chants in basically at a hot spring. And where I live in British Columbia, there's this lovely hot spring where there's a cave behind it, calcite cave, and I go and chant there with not too many people around, even in the winter when the snow is falling, and it's divine acoustics, really.
Wonderful. So that is sort of how it opens. That's the opening.
Yeah.
The opening hymn, as it were.
Right.
And from that, what is the next developmental stage of the learning at this school?
Well, I haven't chosen exactly the step-by-step process with it, but it's most of people that come to me initially have had their astrology chart done. So there's a whole segment it's a little wider than what I call Kabbalistic astrology. But what I'm doing is one learns the planets to map them onto a tree of life, so that one's astrology chart is very personalized and in relationship to the Sefer Yetzirah, the Hebrew book that explicates the meaning of the letters and the spheres and that sort of thing. So what I do from that is design collectively rites of passage. So the idea is to, you see,
a personal hero's journey.
Yeah, and it's a matter of helping to design personal ceremony. Much of what you'll find in, say, Native American or shamanic work is personal ceremony that's designed to clear energy centers, let go of unnecessary conditioning, work with gateways towards spiritual inflow or influx. So that's a very specific work that is different than, say, the ceremonial calendar of a tribe or a people. This is to help individuals create a ceremony or a gateway that is astrologically appropriate for their particular consciousness. So that's
and point in life.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's a little more to life than a bar mitzvah here and a wedding there. We've kind of lost the transitional stages required for various aspects of our
like
growth.
the living funeral.
Well, what do you mean by that?
Well, from death into life.
Right.
Resurrection is what it really means.
Right.
A new slant on an ancient ritual.
Right.
Yeah. And you also get involved in energy medicine.
The energy medicine is really a really deep study of the tree of life, whereby one looks at all of the different possible alliances between the friends in the different life kingdoms, the herbals, the homeopathics, the aromatherapeutics, the star elixirs, the gem essences, the flower remedies, all the different energy medicine, which is very much...
Were those rooted and found in original Kabbalah?
Only to a certain extent. It's like what you would have in traditional Kabbalah would be things that would parallel what you might find in Paracelsus. It would be the right time for taking a remedy through astrology, or perhaps the planetary correspondence. I thought when I first started, being interested in Kabbalah, that I was a letter mystic. I'm a poet. I was interested in the power of the sound, the letter, the gematria, the language.
Sure.
And over the years, I realized, well, that's interesting, but everything practical I do has to do with the energy medicine aspect. So it took me a long time to figure out what I was doing.
Sure. Now, one of the other aspects of the school, it appears, Joseph Mark, is to do with Merkava.
Right.
And this is a word in great circulation these days.
Right.
Could you explicate?
Right. Well, it is in great circulation these days, mostly from the influence of Drindalo, who...
Melchizedek.
In Hebrew, the word Merkava, rather than Merkava, Merkava means to ride in a chariot. And there was a school of mystics in Alexandria, perhaps about anywhere from 700 BCE to 300 BCE. And it was a school for imaginal journeying, is what we would call it now, and involved both a descent in consciousness, somewhat like our present hypnotherapeutic regression, as well as something that you could call trance channeling or interdimensional traveling. We had a great variety of techniques there, but most of them had to do with using the Hebrew letters as either geometric or sonic fields for that travel.
Yes.
And as there's a tremendous amount of sacred geometry that underpins Kabbalah because of the number symbolism of the Hebrew words, for instance, the Hebrew word Merkava has a gematria of 267, which is the Hebrew, it's the degree of the galactic center right now. So there's a tremendous amount of...
at this point in time.
At this point in time, in this particular little 72-year inlet point.
Yes.
So that work obviously has appeared and disappeared at different points. And I certainly was interested in Drunvalo's work, but then I was given a series of sonic meditations that went with it and kind of took it in a different direction that felt more in alignment with my...
More Hebraic.
More Hebraic,
yeah. And now the Merkava is considered to be Egyptian, is it not?
Well,
the word itself from a hieroglyph? Or Hebrew?
No.
Is the bet and the vet virtually the same in the situation?
They are similar, and obviously there was some language sharing between Hebrew and Egyptian. So in Hebrew, even you could pronounce it Merkaba or Merkava. You could also say Merachava. I mean, there's, many different.
And what would that mean?
Well, that would mean...
it was the same meaning of chariot.
Yeah, yeah. But I think Drinvalo looked at it, and Mer in Egypt means really to measure. And the Ka is one body, and the Ba is another, so
That's
it has
right.
to do with the measurement or the ratio between the Ka and the Ba, and that was his explanation.
Of course, the Egyptians were always dealing with proportion.
Absolutely.
Of human proportion in particular.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the Hebrew Merkava is a little different, but still the whole notion that there is geometrical fields in the light body is something that I absolutely agree with. And,
Absolutely. Sure.
and what happens, I've had one or two people who were clairvoyant, who actually, when I was working with the sonic fields of the harmonics, saw shifts and changes in that light body. So it's quite fascinating there.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
In fact, that opens up to one of the other components of the school, which is involved with meditation.
Right.
And entering deeper interdimensional.
Right. So the meditation, I like to see it arise spontaneously from the attunement of the group. It's rather than taking people on a sustained visualization or induction. If the work goes to a profound level, meditation arises spontaneously. So Kabbalah works a lot like Sufism in that there are a number of different techniques, some involving movement, some involving sound. So the focus is on any one particular sense, so to the point where the attunement becomes so refined that meditation happens.
Occurs, exactly.
Occurs.
Yeah.
But I do plan with the school to put people into groups and pods, as it were, so that for some practices they'll be working in groups of 2, some in works of 3 in terms of triangulation work, and sometimes for the movement work, what I like to do is create kind of you could call it a Bereshit snowflake if you want, like a Star of David with 6 corridors. And I worked with this actually some years ago in dance choreography. With people in modern dance, and they find it quite fascinating. It has to do with symmetry and mirroring of rhythm patterns in 3 corridors in a kind of a snowflake design.
Interesting.
And it's a very, because at a certain point with the with that snowflake, you'll get into group mind. The 6 beings will become one after a certain amount of time.
So one big flake.
Well, I don't know if it's a flake or it's a family of quarks or something.
Right, or charbs.
Yeah, right.
Talking about such things, actually reminding me of some of the work of George Ivanovich Gurdjieff, whose main influences were Sufi in nature, and he referred to himself commonly as a dance teacher.
Right.
And these were, of course, sacred temple dances that he learned from the Sufis.
Right.
And I was in a school studying these. They were known as movements, and they had a lot to do with mirroring, paralleling others' movements, forming a geometric pattern as a whole.
As a whole, yeah.
And the state of mind necessary to perform the movements was such that your attention had to be quite honed and very disciplined in order to stay both with the pattern and in the pattern within yourself, as well as in the pattern of the group.
Right. Well, it's quite a challenge for a human being to have maximum individuation and still stay in alignment with the group energy field.
That's right. That's one of our challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another aspect to that work that Abulafia developed, which was called Sfat Otiot, the language of the letters. And this involves the attunement to the 22 Hebrew letters as a finding them energetically in the body. So in that work, it's a matter of we'd study the meaning of the letter, and then everyone in the school has the creativity to find it in their body in their own way. And there may be some help with sonics or the group energy. So that's a lot of fun.
That's
really
neat.
Enjoy that work. So.
That's actually reminiscent of Steiner's work with eurythmy.
Well, actually, what happened there, to the best of my knowledge, is that Steiner was influenced by a man who was a rabbi who knew the Svat Otiot as a child.
Ah.
So that was something
So
that he
that's its
saw as
origin.
a child and adapted it. But, from my standpoint, it became a little bit too Germanic and a little bit too structured, whereas the Kabbalistic allows much more freedom of individual expression.
Free form.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So, I think his name was Max Thion. He's a French Kabbalist.
Mm-hmm. You also mentioned in your brochure about the school, 4 worlds of healing.
Well, this is something that's very in Jewish renewal. It's sort of everyone learns this. It's basically the 4 worlds of the self.
Mm-hmm.
So you begin to look to make sure that there's balance between the physical, emotional, the mental, and the spiritual bodies. And when one is doing that kind of movement work or sound work, people begin to realize where they are out of balance. So it's a matter of designing ceremony, personal ritual, working in groups to use mirroring, even sometimes voice dialogue, different things, so that one can bring those shields or mirrors or aspects of self back into alignment. The other aspect of that work is the Hebrew teaching about the 5 levels of the soul. So within the Hebrew teaching, and other traditions have this as well, that there's 5 different aspects or valences to the soul. There's the nefesh, which is in the belly, the ruach around the heart,
breath,
the neshama, which is the soul, which is perhaps around the pineal gland, the chaya, which is the etheric body, the energy field, and the yechida, which would be the God spark. So there is in this work, there's the possibility to develop a kind of, you could call it an etheric vision, you could call it a high sense perception, you could call it a shamanic vision, but it's a matter of being with the group and coming to consensus in the art of seeing what is happening with the breathing and with the soul energy.
What is happening where?
What is happening
in
where?
The body.
Exactly. And there's other trainings that do this, but this is certainly working with the Hebrew model and template for it.
Oh, excellent. That sounds fabulous.
It is fabulous. It's
How do
really
we sign up? It's going to be in Boulder.
It's going to be in
Boulder. Which is one of the points on top of the world.
Right, you've got a little altitude there. Boulder's becoming kind of a village and a mecca for all sorts of things. It always has. I mean, I went to Naropa 22 years ago or something like that.
Gosh, yeah.
And I've passed through many times, but Boulder's sort of having another renaissance, as it were.
Yeah.
And I had been taking people for more outdoor retreats and such, like in Sedona and other places. And I may yet do a 10-day up where I live in British Columbia, but for an ongoing school, Boulder did feel like the best place to do it.
Oh, it sounds excellent. And what better teacher than Joseph Mark Cohen leading the way, leading the pack into the homeland, Yerushalayim,
well,
in the West.
Yeah, Boulder has become quite a cultural mecca.
Yeah.
I mean, I at one time in '92 was attempting to take groups of people to the Mediterranean and had like a little 6-day school in 10 different places where Kabbalah was traditionally, studied and
disseminated.
I took a few people here and there, but it wasn't something that that many people could afford or get to. So now I've got to bring those experiences to people that perhaps different people in the school will have been to sacred sites and they'll have shared memories. So
sure,
like that.
Sure. Well, it sounds excellent. It really, I wish you a tremendous amount of good fortune and mazel.
Thank you.
With the entire thing.
Thank you.
What is a phone number that if people want to learn more about what you're up to, both with the Kabbalistic astrology as well as the school?
Sure. They can call me at 250-229-2888. 2227. And I have a series of audio cassettes that would be prefatory to the school, and I do the individual work with the Kabbalistic astrology, and then I do, people enroll in the school by private interview, and the Boulder School starts the 13th to the 15th of March, and then is March, June, September, and December. There is also the possibility that I'll be doing a summer school.
So is it a one-year program?
It's a one-year program at this time, and I think there'll probably be 2 or 3 different one-year classes. There'll likely be one in Europe in the summer in Sweden, and there's a group that wants to do it, I believe, in Berkeley starting in the fall. And then once there's enough students who've graduated from the one-year program, then I'll think about what kind of advanced program and what kind of form to do with it.
Right. So. Wonderful. Is there another number, or is that the main number?
That's it.
Why don't you give it one more time?
229-2227.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for being on the show again.
Hey,
we love having you, you know.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. And perhaps in the future we'll go into some greater detail about the sound work and the use of the word shamanic relative to the Kabbalah, which actually the word that came up in my consciousness was when you were describing what you were was archetypal. And yes, it could be shamanic in nature or heroic, but it's that there are these archetypal images that keep streaming forth from history and maybe before that into our consciousness that we all play out.
Right. We do have a Hebrew word shemen, which means to anoint. So, and also you have the word Mashiach, which also has to do with
the king,
process of anointing.
The anointed one.
Yeah. So in that case, you see the shamanic as an anointing or a opening of the pineal gland, opening up of consciousness to the visionary realm.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, on that anointing note, thanks again for being with us.
My pleasure, Mitchell.
Absolutely. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. We're very glad that you've joined us again. Please feel free to call me at 212-420-0800. I love hearing your thoughts and feelings that you share with me. And I look forward to seeing you all next week.